And I must commend the principal for that, because it was a very, very scary time. And we had school the next day. A lot of my children weren't there. A psychologist today, after all the turmoil down in Arkansas, would say I was wrong, probably, because they say you should talk about these things to the children. But the only thing I could tell the children, and they already knew, was that there was an accident down at the island, something was wrong, and they were trying to fix it. And if you had to leave, you'd have to leave. And that was all I could have told them anyway, so I just didn't say anything, particularly unless someone asked me something. I decided that we would just continue on with our regular routine. I wanted the room to be sort of a safe haven for them. They were 5. And let them come in and do what we always did as best as we could. And I had one little girl who was very bright and very more anxious about everything. All of her papers had to be perfect, that kind of thing. So she must have heard her parents talking, because I knew they would not have expressed this fear to her. They were good parents. And she came up wringing her hands and said, "Oh, Mrs. Maxwell, oh, Mrs. Maxwell, what is going to happen to my neighbor's baby?" And I said, "Well, what's wrong with your neighbor's baby?" And she said, "She hasn't had it yet." And then I realized she heard her parents talking. So I reassured her and told her that her parents' baby would be, that her neighbor's baby would be just fine, and that she should not worry about it because they would leave if they had to go. And that was all I had to say to her. That reassured her that she was okay. By this time it was March, and the children have, at that age, have great confidence in a kindergarten teacher. You become kind of a surrogate mother. So if you say it's okay, So anyway, another little boy, the next day, the classroom size kept getting smaller, and they came back for his friend to leave. And he walked over to the window and stuck his hands in his pockets, and he looked out. And by that time, I put my blinds back up. I thought that was silly. And looked out, and he said, "I guess it's this 3 Mile Island thing." And I thought, yes, it is. And so we had school, I believe, until Friday. And then the schools were closed. And I believe, my memory fades, but I believe they opened the following Wednesday. And the situation was supposed to have been resolved. Whether it was or not, I don't know, but it was supposed, anyway, everybody came back. And because we had off 2 days, the other teachers in the district said it wasn't fair, that we should have to make up those days at the end of the year. Now, the principal in our school was a very clean person, and at the end of the year, everything had to be out of the room so they could be clean. The children scrubbed their desks, their chairs. This was a tremendous amount of fun for everyone but the teacher. And then when they were pushed out of the room, all the books were taken out, all the library books were taken to the library to be counted. Very, very efficient. So we had 2 days with not a thing in the rooms. We had to make up that time. And I thought that was kind of stinky, because it really was not a fun time. But we had fun. We went on a picnic, and I don't know, we did all sorts of fun kind of things, so it wasn't too bad, really. As far as the school is concerned, those were my memories. Because we were back in a wing, in the very back corner of that wing. So I was removed from the rest of the building. And I didn't see anxiety on other children's faces because I was in my room. And the school population went down tremendously in those few days that were there, left the last couple days. That's about it.
Okay. Maybe I could ask you what you did during the time, following after Friday, after school was out. What did you and your family do?
Well, we were here. My husband was the supervisor of the township, and so he was tremendously busy, and our phone rang off the hook. One elderly man, who's now passed on, called and said, "Can you ensure my safety?" We had all kinds of crazy phone calls. And Dave said, "Well, no, Nate, I can't ensure your safety." He said, "You could walk across the street and get hit by a car." And he said, "Well, then I'm going to leave." And so, but there were all sorts of phone calls. The phone just rang off the hook here, and I'm sure it did at the township building. And it was just a very hectic time. That's what I remember mostly.
Did you stay in the area in time?
Yes, we did. We were not going to leave. We decided not to leave. There were too many people were calling. We felt that somebody had to stay. My husband was going to stay, and I could not leave if he didn't go. So we stayed. We were going to stay. And in a sense, I think it was easier for me after we made that decision, because the decision was made, and I didn't have to stew around anymore about should we leave now or should we stay or what should we do. My oldest son was at Shippensburg College at that time working on his master's degrees, plural, and I had arranged for my 19-year-old and my younger son to go there in case something worse, in case they said to evacuate. But as long as they didn't tell us to evacuate, we did stay. And oddly enough, the one I thought would be the safest was my oldest son, who developed leukemia about 7 years later. And he had a project. He was working on his master's thesis and had this project on the river. Now, I know that they probably would say there's no relevance to this, and there may not be, but I will always be suspicious of that. He told us he was getting a major in I guess geology or earth science, I don't know which, and biology. So he decided to study the temperature of the river above, below, and around the island, and then also take samples of the soils and the mollusks, the life at the bottom of the river. And he had arranged to have some kind of a scoop thing made, which he would go out. I didn't want him to do this because the river is extremely dangerous for people who are not too familiar with it, and he wasn't too familiar with the river. My husband didn't want him to do it because he said he was doing a doctoral thesis for a master's, and he felt that it was going to take too much time. But David, being David, was determined, and so he did this and arranged to have someone go with him. That was to reassure me that he would be okay. And he had about 12 stations, different places in the river, and 3 Mile Island allowed him to come either very close or on the island, I'm not sure which, to scoop soil around the island. And he did this starting from September on, and in March, after the or April, he went into his laboratory and all of his samples were gone. So I said to him, what happened to them? He said, I don't know. Now, whether he knew or not, I don't know. Whether if he knew and they were dangerous, he would have not wanted us to know. But if perhaps he didn't know. I just thought maybe someone took a Geiger counter over them. I don't, but they would say, oh, no, no, no. We have had people checking. He was not allowed to check for radiation, and he didn't want to. But they had people checking that who kept reassuring people that there was no problem there. So it perhaps, he did work in the environmental field. Perhaps it was something else. I don't know. I just find it extremely odd that his samples were taken. And we have had a lot of leukemia. As when I was growing up, you never heard of leukemia. But then the population has increased tremendously around here. And we're almost megapolis, really, with a few rural patches. And there's a lot of industry. So who's to say? I don't know. In any case, I'm going to stay here. As far as what happened during that time period, the tape that my husband made would be a better reflection of that, because I was here answering phones, trying to do what little I could do in that regard, but he was more involved as far as the township was concerned. So that would be a better thing for you to review if you want to.
See if we can find out. We talked about some of these physical effects. Did you note any psychological implications from the accident?
I thought the teachers were wonderful for the most part in our school district. They were young. A lot of them were young. And they had their lives ahead of them, but they responded well. They did their jobs and did whatever they could do as far as the children were concerned. I don't know what kind of discussions they may have had in their rooms because I was not there. I saw some anxiety expressed by two teachers, one who came down a major highway and could see the water vapor coming out of the part that was still working. And she seemed quite concerned about that. And I tried to reassure her that there was, but she wasn't frantic. I didn't see anybody. I saw parents coming into the school looking frantic. And someone else could tell you more about that, the people who were there.
Do you know people who left the area?
Yeah, well, quite a few people left the area. I have a friend who is an older retired teacher in Middletown. I play cards with her once in a while. We belong to the same book club. And she's in her 80s. And she said her neighborhood, in her street, was empty. She stayed, but the rest of the street was empty. A lot of people left. I can't tell you how many. There'll probably be a record of that somewhere.